What's going on, all you wonderful 8-plussers out there? It is I, Stuart, here, once again with another review for you. This time I'm going to be talking about Star Wars Tales of the Underworld. And yes, it has been a long time since I've done a solo review, and how fitting is it that my first time doing a solo review in a while is, of course, something Star Wars related. See what I did there? So Tales of the Underworld is, of course, the third season of the Tales of franchise. We first had Tales of the Jedi. We then had, I believe it was Tales of the Empire, or was it Tales of the Dark Side? I totally forgot what the second season was called. But this next one is Tales of the Underworld. So season one, we followed two different Jedi who kind of went down two very different paths. And then season two, we follow basically two Jedi, but in this case, they both fall to the dark side. But actually, no, sorry, season two, one of them wasn't a Jedi. They were a witch of Dathomir. And they both fall to the dark side, but the difference is one of them comes back from the dark side. And I think there was something very similar that they did with season one, is that you had two characters whose storylines kind of paralleled each other, but the outcome was definitely different between the two of them, because we followed Dooku and Ahsoka Tano. But here we're following Asajj Ventress and Cad Bane. In Cad Bane's case, we're following his origin story, whereas Asajj Ventress, we're getting kind of an in-between story for her, one that takes place between her appearance in the Clone Wars, of course, and then the other, being her appearance in the Bad Batch. So it's basically kind of telling us the story of what happened between those two events. Although I think we could actually go a little past Clone Wars, because this more directly, even though it takes place during the events of the Clone Wars, it more directly ties into the events of Star Wars. I believe it was called Dark Disciple, in which Asajj Ventress and Quentin Vos team up in order to assassinate Count Dooku. This is a book that I have not personally read, but I have heard the general synopsis of it, so I have a pretty good idea of what happens. Like, the two of them fall in love. Quinlan falls to the dark side, but then he gets turned back to the light side, and Asajj Ventress dies trying to save his life. I don't know the specific details on how it all happens. It is a book that I probably should read at some point, but I do want to start with the Cad Bane stuff before I get to Asajj Ventress. And I'm just going to let you guys know that this review overall is probably going to be short, only because there's not really too much to say about these. They are very kind of straightforward storylines, not bad, but not like anything mind-blowing. And I think it's just hard to review this when we have Star Wars Andor, so we see what kind of peak Star Wars looks like. Whereas the Tales of series have never been bad, but they've always been just kind of, I guess underwhelming would be the best way to put it. And I think it's mostly just because they're incredibly short. You get 6 episodes, but each of them are under 22 minutes. I don't think they usually don't even go past 20 minutes. So, there's only so much story that you can really get out of them. I think they do a good job with what they're given. I just think that, they could probably do a lot more if they weren't so restricted. So, starting with the Cad Bane stuff, we get his origin story, and it's kind of like your typical Aladdin type thing, where he and then a friend of his grew up on the streets, very poor, basically as scavengers. But through kind of some of their cons that they would do, a bounty hunter kind of notices that the two of them have some potential. So he basically recruits the two of them. Cad Bane's friend is a bit hesitant at first, but Cad Bane is, of course, all in, because he's it's the typical, I'm tired of living my life this way. So they do a job for him, and it almost goes well, except for Cad Bane ends up losing his friend. His friend ends up getting arrested. And I think this is the moment that, Cad Bane really starts to go down the path that he does to the character that we see in the Clone Wars, because while there's a brief moment where Cad Bane isn't sure if he should go back for his friend, he looks at the options. It's either going back and getting arrested with your friend, or sticking with the crime boss who's hired you, where you're going to be well paid, and that ends up being what he goes for. Years later, we see Cad Bane as an adult. The crime lord that basically hired him has been killed by an officer, a Republic officer, or I believe. Actually, I don't know if the planet that they're on is part of the Republic, or part of the Separatists, or just a fully neutral planet. Only because the timeline of this event isn't really clear. So how old Cad Bane is also not necessarily clear. So for all we know, this could be 30 years before the Clone Wars. This could be 40, 50, maybe right before the Clone Wars. It's hard to say. They don't give a definitive timeline, I don't think. But regardless, he gets killed, and Cad Bane is very much, it kind of reminded me of Ellie from the Last of Us 2 video game and even the TV show, where it's just this is something he cannot let go. So he heads back to the planet in order to find the officer that shot him. And basically, his plan is to just kill him, but he runs into his brother, or not brother, his friend, the one that he left behind. And unexpectedly, his friend is actually an officer as well. And so he's warning Cad Bane to basically leave and just like let this go. But of course, the big story is that Cad Bane cannot let this go. Now, there's also a love interest that's also introduced, and I'm so sorry that I'm not using any names right now. It's really just because these are one-off characters, and it's quite the names are quite forgettable if I remember correctly, and the characters themselves are quite forgettable. Their purpose is really more just to serve as their purpose is just to move Cad Bane's storyline forward, so that's probably why they're kind of forgettable characters. But he has a love interest, and in getting his revenge, she ends up getting killed, and she, in her final words, tries to get Cad Bane to let this go, but of course, Cad Bane just straight up tells her that he can't. So he ends up leaving the planet, coming back years later with his group that he ran with, and then as they arrive, he finds out that his friend now has a kid, and that this was something that we thought we knew from the previous episode, which is that his love interest was shot, but come to find out that wasn't actually or she was shot, but she wasn't killed. That was not actually the case. She wasn't actually killed. She survived. And it turned out that she was pregnant when Cad Bane left with Cad Bane's son. So she ends up giving birth to Cad Bane's son, and then he ends up getting raised by Cad Bane's friend, up until I think it's like, he's probably like 5 or 6 years old when Cad Bane arrives again. Cad Bane comes, kills his friend, his son, Cad Bane's son, not knowing it's his son, witnesses the whole thing. And so, it kind of just ends with Cad Bane like walking off like nothing, thinking absolutely nothing of the whole thing. Like there might be something there, but if it is, like there might be a little bit of guilt there, but if it does exist, Cad Bane doesn't want anyone to know that it's there. So it was not a bad storyline. Again, pretty generic. It is something where you look at Cad Bane's character, and it definitely lines in with the character that we know from the Clone Wars. Very much he's never been a guy for empathy or to really like care about other people. The whole thing of him going on a revenge, it felt less that it was because he actually really cared about his mentor, and more just something was taken from him, and therefore he has this very much like his own kind of set of justice, like a life for a life type of justice mindset. So again, not bad. They were just very okay episodes, and I think that the Asajj Ventress, mostly the same thing. I like them a little bit more though. So Asajj Ventress, it takes place, like I said, right after the events of the book's Dark Disciple. So she's dead, but she gets resurrected. But there is kind of a catch to her resurrection. She gets resurrected after the Clone Wars. So right as the Empire has already started to take over the galaxy, and she I believe like part of the condition of her being resurrected also means having to let go of Quinlan Vos. Now I thought that's why she got resurrected post Empire, or sorry, post Fall of the Republic. I thought the whole thing was supposed to be like, oh, you're now resurrected, but it's after Quinlan Vos has died, which means you'll never see him again. However, it is implied that he might still be alive, as there is a path that Jedi have been following. Now, this is probably a trap from the Empire. We never get a definitive answer to this, but we do know that the Empire did have, fake sanctuaries for young Padawans and surviving Jedis that would really just end up being torture chambers where they can just kind of indoctrinate them into becoming inquisitors for the Empire. So that's probably what the path was, but we never really get a definitive answer because Asajj Ventress and the young kid that she takes in, she kind of mentors, they never go down there. Now, the parallels here is that like Asajj Ventress, much like Cad Bane, was an assassin or just kind of a gun for hire. She worked very closely under Count Dooku because, Dooku hired her not as a Sith apprentice, but as an assassin for the Separatists, essentially. So that's how they get around the rule of two during the events of the Clone Wars. There's still only two. You have Darth Sidious, and then, of course, Count Dooku. but you also have Asajj Ventress because she's really more of a gun for hire, even though she doesn't, wield guns, she wields lightsabers, but she's really more of a gun for hire than an actual like apprentice. Even though there is a part of Dooku that kind of sees her as an apprentice as the series goes on. But with that being said, so when she left the Separatists, she kind of just became, went back to her ways of just kind of being a bounty hunter, a gun for hire, although she started to develop more of a conscience over time. And we definitely see that playing out here. She still comes off as cold, but it's really just because she doesn't like the idea of, attachments, kind of similar to the Jedi, except for her, it's because attachment always leads to tragedy for her. And I think she's just gotten tired of like dealing with tragedy in her life. Quinlan Voss was someone that she fell in love with, and then he ended up turning to the dark side, and then she ended up dying trying to save him, and then when she came back, he was gone. She wasn't allowed to essentially see him again. So now we have this new kid that gets introduced, and he's kind of like looking up to her as he's a very young Padawan. And this is probably a few years after the events of Revenge of the Sith, which means he was probably a lot younger too when the Empire rose to power. So, like again, when you survive Order 66 as a Padawan, you don't get out of there without trauma, as we've seen from several other characters within the Star Wars franchise. So he survives at a young age and tries to stick with Asajj Ventress even after he finds out who she actually is. And I do really like how she kind of mentions it's not smart to have friends in this line of business that she's doing, because she ends up having to work with a couple of other bounty hunters that she's worked with in the past that they know. And I like how immediately, like right as they're kind of like on the ship, her friends are trying to tell the kid, hey, maybe don't trust Asajj Ventress. And then as they get off the ship, the kid tells Asajj Ventress, hey, they don't trust you. And she's like, yeah, if they try something, kill them. And I do like this whole, like, again, she's looking out for only herself, and she's helping this kid only because he's trying to find a path that was supposedly, made by Quinlan Voss. And so she's doing it really more for him and not really for herself, or not because it's the right thing to do. Or at least that's what her mindset is when she's doing it. Now, by the end of the story, there is a really cool story line for the third episode, which involves like such a simple conflict, one over water. And it was like you had this farmer who's just like trying to look after his daughter. He's trying to provide for her, so he ends up stealing water from some of the locals. But the whole thing doesn't really get explained, because he ends so basically they end up thinking that he's just like stealing their water, not realizing the full situation that he finds himself in. So it ends up leading to kind of I don't want to call it like a full-on war, but yeah, I guess in a way it is a war between him and the locals on the planet. Asajj Ventress, of all people, ends up being the peacekeeper in the situation, the one that kind of like just tells the old man, how about you actually try talking to them, letting them know that you need the water to provide for your daughter and yourself. And what I like is the storyline of him just being so basically what's the word, like suffering so much from post-traumatic stress disorder from the events of the war, and just feeling like he was on the losing side, because in the perspective of the Separatists, they lost the war, even though kind of, if you really think about it, both sides lost the war. There were no winners during the Clone Wars. And I like how that even gets brought up in the episode itself. Like Asajj Ventress straight up kind of just says, yeah, both sides were the wrong side, when this older man like kind of looks up to Asajj Ventress because he recognizes her as Dooku's assistant. And so but when she kind of like breaks it to him, like, yeah, both sides were wrong and we need to stop fighting, I do like that he eventually agrees to this. But it's not just as simple as being able to put down your blaster. He's like, he as he kind of describes, he's fought his entire life, and now he just doesn't know how to let go. And that's very real. That is very, very real. So I did really like these two arcs that we got from Cad Bane and Asajj Ventress. I thought overall Tales of the Underworld was decent, but pretty underwhelming. It's probably my least favorite out of the Tales of series that we've gotten so far. And that's too bad, because I was really looking forward to seeing how these storylines would play out. And they just ended up feeling very okay. And so that all being said, it's like something that I wouldn't recommend people don't watch. Like if you have an interest in watching it, definitely check it out. It's just not something I would tell someone to go out of their way to watch if they didn't have that much interest in it to begin with. But if you do like the characters of Cad Bane and Asajj Ventress, it's worth a really quick watch. Just like this review being pretty quick, honestly. But yeah, so I think I would, if I were to grade this, I think I would give it like a 6.5 out of 10. You know what? I'll probably honestly just drop it down to a 6 if I have to round up or down. So I think I'm going to round down to 6, give it a 6 out of 10. Not bad. It's just not going to like change your whole point of view of Star Wars or anything like that. And again, maybe my disappointment is just that I've been so invested in Andor, and I see how amazing Star Wars can be when the writing is absolute peak. And that's not me trying to say that I want every Star Wars to be like Andor. No, I want Andor to be kind of its own thing. I still want to make sure we have the fun, campy sci-fi adventures as well. But it's just nice to have Andor going alongside all of that. But at the end of the day, though, guys, those are just my A+ opinions, and we here at A+ Opinions always want to know what you guys think. So definitely let me know your thoughts on this on these 6 episodes of Tales of the Underworld in the comments below. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel. But of course, guys, above all, don't forget to keep it A+, and we will talk to you all later.